What do you think draws people to comic books?
What draws people to any other kind of entertainment medium, right? There's a kind of storytelling feature that they want to access, right? So particularly as comic books and graphic novels start to tell a wider range of stories again, they break outside of that ghetto of the superhero genre. Historically, again, we had that sort of focus on a collector subculture where recapturing a certain feeling from childhood was often a part of the attraction, right? So people were exposed to comics in their youth and they stayed collectors, and they were trying to complete their runs of particular titles. They were looking to collect all of the work of a particular artist or writer. They had a particular emotional attachment to a certain character, and they wanted to collect everything that that character appeared in, for example. So there were lots of different motivations captured up in the collecting impulse. But now we see, I think, a greater proportion of the comic book audience are oriented to reading comics and accessing them as primarily as entertainment media rather than as collector's items now.
Why do people form an attachment to the past using comic books?
I think that part of it is that association with childhood, that comics, particularly for a certain segment of the audience, comics were a medium that, as children, as teenagers, sort of both separated them from some of their peers, but also bonded them tightly with other groups of friends, and so that attachment with childhood is often a large piece of many of our media consumption patterns. So I think there's something very similar happening there with comics. So for those members of the audience who bonded with their friends, who escaped from certain other kinds of pressures, perhaps through comics when they were children and teenagers, the ability to recapture something of that feeling by buying a material object and storing it in your home and pulling it out every once in a while, flipping through the pages, feeling the material of the paper stock, that there's a very kind of affective, tactile quality to reading comics.
Would you say that the comic book industry is more nostalgic than other forms of entertainment, or would you say they're fairly on par?
I would say that historically it has been more nostalgic, but we're at a moment right now in a lot of media industries that are very heavily driven by nostalgia. So, the extent to which you go to the movie theater these days, and 80% of what you see will be remakes of existing franchises, right? So again, trying to use nostalgia and the way that we recognize existing brands and franchises as a way to try to manage demand for media properties, right? To say, we know we can rely on there being a certain audience for a Star Wars movie or a Ghostbusters movie.
Okay, so kind of drawing off of the Ghostbusters example, does nostalgia ever backfire on companies?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the Ghostbusters example is obviously a great one, right? That attempt to present something that's familiar but different, which I think is the sweet spot that all of these companies want to hit, right? Something that will bring you out but will not seem boring and tired and repetitive. So the appeal to properties with tried and true existing fandoms is that you can guarantee that those people will come out to your movie no matter what, right? Whenever they release a Star Trek movie or a Star Wars movie or a Marvel movie, there's a certain number of people who will come no matter how bad the reviews are, no matter what, right? Because they are fans of those characters, they're fans of those properties.
You often hear a lot of negative feedback from fans of original series that they don't like the reboots or the sequels. So why do you think they keep coming back to watch these movies despite seemingly hating them?
Sometimes people like to be outraged. They like to go and criticize it. I think at some level, I think that at some level, they're still entranced by the franchise, by the property, by the characters and the universe that it created. But I think we don't know a lot yet about that.